Welcome to this morning's lecture. Let me begin by apologizing for starting late. That's to do with some technical challenges that I have over here. My name is Daphne Udineje, and I'll be anchoring this course for the next 4 weeks. We've already lost some time, so let me quickly introduce you to some of the topics that we'll be handling within the period that we have. First of all, we'll be talking about the course is journalism, script writing, and editing. And of course, as a mass communicator, these are the basics. How to know how to write a clean script, and of course, not just writing, but also being able to trim down your work to fit into, the selected space meant for it, and that apparently means you're being able to choose the right ones, being able to have a rich vocabulary. There's a rich vocabulary that can easily help you, use words concisely and precisely. So this morning we'll be looking at first, what is journalism, and of course for subsequent classes, we'll look at different kinds of journalism. We'll look at news stories, community journalism. We'll look at interpretative, reporting. We'll look at investigative reporting, and all of that. And of course, then we're going to look at writing. How do you write a good script? Therefore, we're going to do a little course on correct English. What is correct English? Common errors in grammar. Of course, we'll look at style, diction, and word order. And lastly, we're going to look at editing. Now, for this morning's class, what is journalism? Now, journalism covers a wide field, and it is not easy to frame, a definition for it. Perhaps the nearest we shall get to is to say that a journalist is one who contributes regularly to the periodical press, whether as his chief means of livelihood or as a part-time occupation. And please, you also have to pardon me this morning. I couldn't present the script, but I promise in the next class, you'll have all that I'll be talking about today, and of course, in the subsequent classes. So a journalist, who is a journalist? A journalist is a person who contributes to the daily report, to the daily periodicals, and then he can also do it as a freelancer or as a part-timer. Now, we can also look at this. Journalism is gathering, processing, and dissemination of news and information related to the news or to an audience. Now, the word applies to both the method of inquiring for news and the literary style which is used to disseminate it. Now, the media through which journalism is conducted vary diversely to include content published via newspapers and magazines. Of course, when you talk about journalism, we have print journalism, we have broadcast journalism. Print journalism has to do with the electronic, has to do with newspapers, the hard copy, while broadcast journalism has to do with electronics. When you talk about the radio, TV, and their digital versions published through digital media, news websites. At this stage, we have websites, blogs, news blogs, and all of that. And for the print, we have the magazine, the newspaper, the newsletters, and most other published work. Now, the profession of journalism is highly responsible one. It calls for outstanding qualities of mind and character. and it is one which makes severe demands on those who practice it. All right. To be a journalist means you have to be thinking on your toes. You have to be always on the run. Now, the good journalist should think long and carefully before getting, along with this. So, any person who, for you as a mass communicator and opting for journalism, is a profession that you know that it is not for weakness. You have to find, you have to have stamina. Aside from physical stamina, you have to be sound mentally. Now, journalism is like medicine. I mean, like medicine or teaching or any other practical profession cannot be learned only from the books in the classroom. Like I always say to some of the students who have that I've lectured, I always say journalism. Most of the courses you do, you get to know it better on the field. So journalism is a practical course. You know it, you know it, you know it, you don't know it. And that is why your work speaks for you. All right, like I've said to students, sometimes your editor may not like your face, he may not like some things about you, but if you are a good writer, he will publish your work. He must publish your work. And so that is it about journalism. It's a profession that you, as a journalist, must on your own be good. You have to strive daily to make sure that you improve on your writing because it's a practical thing. Now, of course, here in the class, we can talk about the arts of writing. We can point out the beginner how to follow, but the arts and the craft or the mystery of writing can be learned on the job. So let me also encourage you here. You're already in your 400 level. Nothing stops you from contributing to blogs, from contributing to newspapers. And of course, like the school has a program where you're expected to go for your IT. This will be a very good opportunity for you to make the most of that period. It's not a period to maybe dodge and you feel it's a time to relax. No. As much as you write, you learn. The only way to learn to write is to write. Now, talking about the qualification of journalism, what do you need? I want to look at the physical, the mental, and of course, the academical perspective. Now, you have to be physically, mentally, and educationally sound to be a journalist. So please, let's look at this. Physical, the journalist requires to be a man or woman that has a sound physique. Now, this does not mean that you have to be maybe a wrestler or like one of the athletes, no, but to a very large extent, you have to be physically sound. Journalism is not for weakness. You have to be bold, you have to be confident. Now, it will demand stamina too, because as starting students, you may find yourself in a newsroom or in a broadcast media. You get to know that sometimes you have to go extra miles, to produce your story, to make sure you do your job. Sometimes you have to, stretch yourself, if I can use that word. And so all of that they require stamina. Then mentally, a sound general education is one of the first essentials for the would-be journalist. So what this means is that the mass communication journalism is not a career for dropouts. Okay, sometimes some people want to choose a course and you look at yourself, oh, I don't want to do accounting, calculation is there, I don't want to do engineering, but you forget that the art is dynamic. Okay, and that means you have to be dynamic in your use of language, in your writing styles. You have to be highly creative, and that means you have to be very, very sound of this. As the public becomes better informed, there is a growing necessity that you who write for the press shall be yourself more informed. And that's why we said journalism is about knowing a little of everything. So as a journalist, you must know the arts, you must know some sciences, a little about medicine, you must know some things about sports, You must know some things about architecture, just everything, because the people look up to you to know. And there's, we say in journalism that the people have the right to know. And what that simply means is that whatever field you're asked to cover, the people have the right to learn from you. For instance, you're already in your final year. By the time those of you that will choose, to go into the profession properly, the first thing that will be done to you in the newsroom or in a media house is that you go through the ranks. You'll be sent to different bits. You cover all the bits. I'm sure by now you have known about this. We have sports bit, we have the education bit, we have the business bit, we have the fashion bit, we have state house reporting, we have stock market, we have banks, banking and finance. That's you cover banks, the stock market, the money market, and several bits, aviation, maritime, the roads, the rail, and all of that. So the essence of doing this is to ensure that you go through all the bits. Now you don't have to be you don't have to read banking and finance to cover the stock markets, but of course you'll be dealing with figures and calculations. So what that means is that you are expected to know a little of everything. So suffice it to say that as a journalist, you ought to read extensively. I'll say that again. You can't help as a journalist but reading extensively. That is, you have to read beyond your curriculum. And that will set you mentally sound to handle the profession. That is, the journalist must be a person of average intelligence. Yes. You have to be higher, you have to be higher than the average intelligence, rather. You must be higher. You must have a high percentage of intelligence. Not only must you have sharp wits, you must keep up with the pace of modern journalism. Okay, that means you have to, as much as possible, get yourself, acquainted with the nuances, the upcoming technologies in news gathering, upcoming technologies in terms of style. You must learn the new words. You must learn the new entrance into the English language, because language is like a tool with which you communicate, and language itself is dynamic. It evolves. So it will be how should I put it? It should not be right for you as a journalist that you use words that are okay. You'll be using words that were used 10 years back, words that were used 20 years back. This, of course, will not speak good of you as a journalist. So what that means is you should be the ones that people look up to, that we always suggest to people. If you want to learn good English, if you want to learn diction, you want to learn pronunciation, watch the television, listen to the news, listen to the radio, listen to documentaries. These are deliberate, these are programs that are planned by the media houses to educate the people, because the media has a right, it has the responsibility of educating the people. And of course, talking about the purpose, which I've already talked about, the purpose of journalism is to provide citizens with the information they need to make the best possible decisions about their lives. Yes, and of course, you have to do that in good English. You have to do that in the right language. You have to use the right, when you talk about people, there are different stratas, all right? So when you're communicating to the people, you should do a pre-assessment of the people that you're communicating to. I think our time is fast spent. I want to use this period to just give you an assignment which will keep you busy while we look forward to the next class, in which I know we'll be having more time to, to look at the profession, journalism, and editing and script writing. So I want you to take down these questions. What is community journalism? What is community journalism? Number two, What kinds of reporting do we have? What kinds of reporting do we have in journalism? That is another way. List and discuss the types of reporting that are in journalism. Number three, what are the differences between a news story and feature story or features? What are the differences between news story and features? What are the differences between news story and features? I think with that we would wrap up today's class while we look forward to the next class, which will be in a week's time. And I want to encourage you to, on your own, do a little bit more research on some of the things that I've said this morning. And please take time to also go through and do the assignment thoroughly. If you give it what it requires, I'm sure in the next class you flow, you flow because most of the things we'll be talking about will be this thing that already has to do. Since we still have time, let's also talk about a little bit about the person background to journalism. Now, the function of the journalist, one of them is to reflect. A journalist will have to reflect, report, and comment on the day-to-day events which are going on around you. All right. Now, the life of a journalist is different. Journalism, rather, is different from other professions. That is why sometimes it seems journalists are a little bit aggressive, if I can use that word, because as a journalist, you must always see things the other way. All right, you must look at things from a different perspective. I'll give you an example. If you live in a community as a journalist, right? Let's take a simple example. And you see, maybe in the morning you observe children, young persons, just walking around, seem to be idle when they ought to be either at work or in school. So as a journalist, you begin to think, these children ought to be in school, these adults ought to be at work, these young persons ought to be in school or at work. Why are they at home? So simply what that means is that you begin to wonder, could it be they don't know they ought to be in school? Could it be their parents cannot afford to put them in school? And for the others, is it that there's some other things they're doing? Or is it that they don't have a job to do? So in the process of answering these questions, you may need to approach these questions. We say that the profession of journalism is a profession that exposes you, that makes you to free on people. That's in quotes now. You nose around. We say a journalist ought to have a nose for news. So you nose into other people's affairs. So people that you see wandering on this, you begin to ask yourself, is it that they don't have this thing, or is it that there are some other things that they are into? That way, you could discover a crime. You could discover a gangster that is around. You could discover children who are out of school because they don't have, they don't know one, they may not know they will go to government school, they may not know there is a government school somewhere, so as a journalist, you could also on your own approach the parents, approach the appropriate schools that they could attend, and that is one of the ways. That's why we said to help people to take decisions. As a journalist, it's more of a practical thing. You inform people about their rights. So the parents of these children, you can say, don't you know your children ought to be in school? They may tell you, I don't have money. I went to that school, they said to bring money. So as a journalist, it is your responsibility to go to some schools, and of course you're not going to accuse them, but of course you can just say, oh, we have some children who are out of school. I'm a journalist. Once they hear you're a journalist, they want to listen to you because they know you know you know the people, you know what should be done to those children. And for somebody like you, they can ask you for bribe or whatever. That way, you'll be helping the society. That is the practical aspect. That way, you'll be fulfilling your responsibility as a journalist. You have helped children who don't know they could be at least in a public school to be in school. And for the young persons, you may discover these days that we have advanced fit for, you may just discover that we have some of them around. And of course, if there's a way you could help to, get them to get the law to take care of them, you may have to do that. But of course, you have to be discreet about it. Now, the study of the background to events forms a larger part of what we call education. Still talking about practicing journalism. Now, as a journalist, when you get to the practice proper, you'll be invited to events. You'll be asked to cover events. It could be an AGM, it could be a news conference, it could be a social gathering, maybe a wedding or a Thanksgiving in the church. It could be whatever. So one of the ways to also educate yourself as a journalist, one of the ways that you make sure that you handle the occasion properly is by studying the background to the events. Okay, you have to know exactly what the event is all about. You have to understand what the purpose of the event. I give you an example. If you're asked to cover an area of the company, for instance, you do well to get the annual reports of the company, possibly the one of the previous year, because in an AGM they certainly will be reviewing the current, market trading year. So you can't just listen to the chairman doling out information, doling out positive, records about the company. But by the time you go through the records, the annual reports, which you should have as a journalist, if you cover that industry, you should endeavor to have the annual reports of most of the companies that you cover, because these are the places you'll be making your comments from. These are the places you'll be getting information with which you could, of course, ask questions, and you could also uh, get details of um, the activities of the company. Now, again, let's look at um, and let's again look at the news itself. How do you gather your news? How do you get information? How do you get informed? How do you get to know the happenings around you? We have talked about the nose for news, that you as a journalist must always have a knack to always ask questions, to always be curious, you have to be curious about happenings around you. You have to be curious about the people around you. You have to look at things the other way. Now, presenting the news. Presenting the news. Now, all journalists, even the staff men, are much in the position of salesmen offering their wares. Like every business, every journalist that knows his onions is also like a businessman, because you can always broker businesses within your company and the organization that you're covering. You can always broker relationships, all right, between your organization and the company that you are covering. So you always see yourself as a salesperson that is offering wares to your customers. So you always see this, the news editor, the editors are ultimately the reading public. Now, when a reporter comes in with a news story, the first public that reads his story, of course, is his editor, is his sub-editor. And this means that they have something good to offer, but it must be presented in an attractive and acceptable form. Presenting your news, the news story, has a style, okay? It has a format. So if you want your story to be acceptable, there is a format, there is a style that you have to follow. It is true that an astounding good story will be used by a sub-editor, even if he has to rewrite it from the beginning to end. But often the decision as to whether a particular item goes into the paper or on the style depends upon the way in which the reporter has written it. Yes, the way you write your story, most times the size, the way you decide whether it should be published or not. The way you write your story decides whether your story will be published or not. Now, there are many different ways of presenting a story, but the art can only be learned by practice. It is a case of teach yourself, like I said earlier. Now, as a beginner, you should set yourself the task of studying actual news stories. That's why I've given you that assignment. Go and find out what is news story, the different kinds of news we have, and of course, what is the difference between the news story and the feature story. So as a beginner, you have to, particularly those in that the beginner should set, you should set the task of finding it out yourself. Okay, it's an art of teach yourself. You should set yourself the task of studying actual news stories, particularly those in the type of paper for which you write or for the broadcast media for which you work. Now, every newspaper house, now every electronic broadcaster has a sign. So the first thing you learn when you get into the newsroom or the media house is to learn about the sign. Yes, the assembly. So as a beginner, hello, Mr. Yomi. Okay, time up. Okay, thank you. So students, this is where we'll be wrapping it up today. So I suggest that you take time to go through the assignments, and then God's grace, next week we shall have a more fulfilling class. Thank you.